Shalom, welcome to Out of Africa Torah session. My name is Tatra Cohen, and this week we are on Parashat 37, and the name of this Parashat is Shelach, which means in English, send on your behalf, like do it for your sake. It's an amazing statement to begin the Parashat. It's coming from the book of Numbers chapter 13, from verse 1 all the way to chapter 15, verse 41. I will read briefly and we see some of the things we can learn from this parashat. It says in the complete Jewish Bible, Adonai said to Moshe, send men on your behalf to spy the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the people of Israel. From each ancestral tribe, send someone who is a leader in his tribe. And we see, it says later, Moshe dispatched them from the Paran desert as Adonai had ordered. All of them were leading men among the people of Israel. Now, before we get excited, it looks like this was coming from the Lord. But Rashi gives us a very good picture. He brings something which has later on being said from the book of Devarim. And he brings it up in this commentaries parasha to prove that this idea of spying was not coming from Adonai. It was coming from the people of Israel themselves, especially the leaders and Moshe, who actually deliver the issue to Adonai. It is really interesting what Rashi says. From verse 1, Rashi tells us that verse 1 says, send for yourself. In other words, the Lord was simply saying, I don't want to be involved, but since it is your idea, you can go ahead and do it. Now, the chapter of the spies, we are told by Rashi again that it is adjacent to the chapter of Miriam because she was punished over the same matter of evil tongue, or Lashon Hara, as you would want. You remember the offense that Miriam committed, especially Miriam and her brother Aaron committed against Moshe, the servant of Adonai. And we see Rashi telling us again that the problem with this issue, this parasha of the spies who are sent on Moshe's behalf, it's they did not learn. They were evil because they did not learn. They should have learned what happened to Miriam when she spoke against Moshe, the servant of Adonai. Now, the second thing on verse 1, which Rashi tells us again, which I think is very interesting, is Rashi tells us that the parasha says again, send for yourself, according to your own opinion, like as you seem fit. I do not command you if you wish to send. This is exactly what we learn from this parasha, that Adonai was saying, you can go ahead and do what you want. Of course, you have convinced me, but let it be clear from the onset that this is not my idea. And you know, most of us, especially myself, if I go back in history, I see there are several times I try to do certain things, not because God had told me, but because I had so many reasons to give God why this should be done. And sometimes he just watches and does nothing. And this is the similar event. Now, finally, we are told by Rashi that because the Israelites came and said, this is a quotation from what is being said in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 1 from verse 22, if you would read, where it states that it wasn't God's idea to spy the land. Remember what God had said earlier on. This is the land which he had promised to our patriarchs, and he would give to the children of Israel. And he said, go on and take. But the people came to him, according to Deuteronomy chapter 1, and they requested, and they say in these words, all of you approached me. Moshe conferred with the Shekinah. In other words, there was a serious conversation that, okay, you have given us, but you know what? We just want to enter the land and make sure. Now, what do we learn from this story of the spies? Number one, we see that their faith was being tested. It is something that they had never really came across, that you really have to battle with your faith. Mind you, when they were in the wilderness, all this time they were moving, they were just receiving instructions, do this, do this. There wasn't much responsibility or a test which was really involved. When they were given the Torah, we see all of them, they said, hey, we'll do whatever Adonai wants. But guess what? This is the time we begin to see them being tested. So some of us may say, wow, those people were weak, these people were what? We are told in this parasha that these people were men of renown. They were men of standing. They were leaders in their tribes, according to their ancestral tribes, where we just read from the first few verses of chapter 30. So we see that, number one, their faith was being tested. And this is a lesson, it serves as a lesson to you and me today, that when our faith is being tested, we have to be ready to be tested. And we also see that the mission was about self-discovery. They didn't know who they were or what they could do until they faced Canaan. This is when they started discovering themselves. Oh, so we are like this. Oh, so we are nothing. And mind you, the more you discover who you are, the more you grow to depend on the Lord. And we see again that as they were being tested, this is the same thing that you and I are facing each and every time. We are faced with trials and many other things that may try to remove us from the walk which we are in with the Lord. Now, my question to you on the same is, are you afraid? Do you trust God? Can you be tested? Have you ever been tested? Or will you be tested rather? Now, another thing which we learn from this parashat, especially concerning the spies, them in particular, is you need to come to the point of confronting your fears. Of course, they were afraid of, mind you, this is according to what we read, that not all of them were afraid, as we shall see soon. But number one, we see that among the lessons we learn from these spies is you should learn to confront your fears. Many of us are afraid of many things, and it's okay to be afraid, but learn to confront your fears, and that's the only way you can have success. So we see that that which you fear is exactly the door to your success. They were afraid of the giants and so forth, the things that they saw. But mind you, this was exactly the door to their success. Had they confronted these giants at once, they would have made their success quite shorter than what it became later on. So we also see that as you confront your fears, change sometimes may take time. But they were not as ready as they were supposed to be. In other words, when you confront your fears, those things that you fear the most, those things you don't want to talk about, you find yourself whether you are ready or not to go to the next step. And finally, the third thing which I find learning from this parashat is, you should not fail for my sake. Why do I say this? The parashat itself is told, send on my behalf. These men were going there on behalf of the whole children of Israel, beginning with Moses and everybody to the least of them all. Now, if you are sent or you are doing something on, I like how the Jewish people view salvation. Many of us can say, I'm saved, I'm saved. But for us, the Jewish people, we say we are not saved because we see salvation as a national event, something that should encompass both our brothers and sisters, those in the Holy Land, those in the diaspora. If we are all not saved, then we are not yet saved. So we see that in this parasha, it brings a sense of responsibility in the sense that you are sent on someone's behalf. And for that cause, we learn that don't fail for my sake. No, whatever you are doing, whether you are worshiping, you are walking with the Lord, whatever you are doing, make sure you don't fail for my sake. Make sure you don't fail for the sake of the Jewish people. For myself, sometimes there are times I've felt, several times I want to quit. But I didn't quit. Why? Because I'm doing this on behalf of my Lemba people. I know in the back of my heart that I'm sent on their behalf. So whether I'm praying, whether I'm coming for Shabbat, I'm doing whatever I'm doing it on their behalf. And that should give you the sense of responsibility. And this is, mind you, the responsibility these spies carried when they went. Imagine those depending on you and you fail. Unfortunately, the demoralization they would have to face. Sometimes failure comes with remorse. All those things that they have to go through simply because you didn't take your mission serious. But you should learn to take your mission serious because you are sent on someone's behalf. Then we also see that you need to keep things in perspective. If you are sent on someone's behalf, it's like an ambassador. You go on behalf of your country, and as you do so, you need to know that you should always maintain focus. Keep things in perspective. And sometimes challenges come, challenges go. But we are responsible for the actions, like the spies. What was more important was not the spies, but what they did about the spies. Or what was their reaction towards this challenge. And this is the same thing which you and I should look close. As I conclude now, we see that there were 12 of them, each one of them representing the tribe, as we have read from the first few verses of Numbers 13. We also see that 10 of them failed and 2 of them brought a very good report. And amongst those 2, it was more like planting a seed. Sometimes you find you are the only one doing the right thing, and you feel out of place. You feel like the entire world has gone against you because you're the only one doing the right thing. But never feel out of place, because from the very things, that's exactly where God sows a seed. And from that seed of 2, we see them taking another chance. In other words, if you have failed like these spies who failed their first attempt, they also had a chance. And when they took that chance, they managed to accomplish the second time. So if you have failed the first time, it's okay. But you can go again for the second time. And eventually, who knows, with God's blessing upon you, you may just succeed. So never be afraid to take the second attempt. So we see that God never asked us to never fail. Have you heard me? God never asked us to never fail. He understands we fail. But He asks us to never give up. And that's the point I want to put across today on the story and the lessons of these spies. That God does not want us to give up. God wants us to have faith in Him and put our best in any chance, any given chance, any challenge, whether it is the issue of the spies, but we should do our best, and that's what gives Him glory. So we see that the fear of failure causes to fail. In other words, you fail when you are afraid to fail. But it is the willingness of failure which brings success.